Right about time to bring you up to speed what's happening globally and in Nigeria. And we begin with US 2024 elections. 5 key points from Trump and Harris's US presidential debate. US man wins 50 million US dollars after 10 years wrongfully imprisoned. Protesters storm Mexico Senate over judicial reform debate. Thousands flee Vietnam as Typhoon Yagi death toll hits 127 and tropical storm Francine to become hurricane before hitting Louisiana. Stay with me for these and more stories. On US 2024 election, the debate between United States Vice President Kamala Harris and ex-President Donald Trump began with a handshake and ended with the candidates painting one another as awful leaders who should not be elected. For over 90 minutes on Tuesday, Harris and Trump traded barbs in a debate that was light on substantive policy and heavy on personal attacks. Trump tried to portray Harris as a far-left candidate who will pursue open border policies, ban fracking, and confiscate people's guns. He also pushed to connect her to President Joe Biden, painting them as fundamentally the same type of politician. Harris responded by questioning Trump's fitness for office and calling him a disgrace. She also tried to dismiss the former president as an object of ridicule. At many points, she appeared to be suppressing her laughter as Trump spoke. Observers said Harris seemed to leave Trump rattled. Here are few takeaways from the debate, the first meeting of the two candidates. Trump's rhetoric throughout the debate zigzagged across an array of topics, seldom sticking with the subject matter presented in the moderator's questions. One moment, Trump will be talking about the economy, and the next, he will be talking about pipelines. In one breath, he will talk about healthcare, in the next, he will bring up immigration. Then he will talk about something else, then immigration again. Trump grappled to stay on message throughout the debate. His answers lacked focus, and he appeared more concerned with landing blows against Harris. Again and again, he rebounded back to immigration, hoping to score points by invoking Harris's record on the issue. At several points, he also endorsed the falsehood that Haitian migrants and refugees in Springfield, Ohio, are eating people's pets. City officials have dismissed these accounts as untrue. Still, Trump has always been known for his rambling speaking style, so it is not certain that voters will view him more negatively after Tuesday's debate performance. Meanwhile, Harris launched pointed barbs at Trump and appeared to get under his skin, calling him a disgrace on numerous occasions. The vice president also emphasized that the Republicans and former aides who turned against Trump after he won office in 2016. Borrowing a leaf from Trump's playbook, Harris called the Republican candidate weak as well. She repurposed the Trumpian accusation that war will laugh at U.S. leadership and directed it back at the former president. Both Republican and Democratic administrations, however, have maintained close relations to autocratic governments and leaders across the world. Talking judicial matters, a man in the United States has been awarded 50 million US dollars in damages after being unlawfully convicted of murder, in the highest such payout in US history. Marcel Brown, 34, was sentenced to 35 years in prison after being convicted of being an accomplice in the 2008 shooting of a 19-year-old man on the west side of Chicago. Brown served 10 years in prison before being released in 2018 after a court vacated his conviction and prosecutors dismissed all charges against him. A jury at the U.S. District Court in Chicago, after a 2-week trial on Monday, awarded Brown the damages after finding that police had fabricated evidence and coerced his false confession. Law firm Lovey and Lovey said police officers had locked Brown in an interrogation room for over 30 hours, deprived him of food, denied him repeated requests for a phone call, and stopped him from sleeping. Police also threatened him with prolonged imprisonment if he refused to confess, and towed away his mother and a lawyer when he arrived to help him, Lovey and Lovey said. "I was just a kid," Brown said in a statement released through his lawyers. "They put me in a den full of lions and they didn't care or show any remorse." Now, Mexican lawyers were forced to hold debates on controversial judicial reform after protests broke down the doors of the Senate building and forced their way into the upper house's session hall. The vote on the sweeping constitutional reform, under which Mexicans will elect judges at all levels of government by popular vote, was later passed by the Senate, clearing a major hurdle. A crowd broke into the upper house early on Tuesday, forcing Senate President Gerardo Gerardo Fernandez Noronha to ask his colleagues to evacuate the holds, avoid confrontations from the protesters. At least one person has been wounded in the arrest, according to the Senate communications team. The constitutional changes that triggered the chaos are being championed by Mexican President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who has long been critical of his country's Supreme Court after it stood in the way of some of his signature policy proposals. Legal experts say the proposed procedure will turn Mexico into an international outlier. Last week, the reform sailed through the lower chamber of Congress, but Lopez Obrador's ruling coalition required a supermajority to approve it in the upper house. In the end, it received a general approval with 86 votes in favor, 41 against, and 0 abstentions. The bill faced sporadic and vicious critique from U.S. Ambassador Ken Salanza in Mexico City, in which he called the election of judges a major risk to the functioning of Mexico's democracy. His comments have led to a spat between the countries, warnings from business groups that the reform could undermine the Mexican investment environment and have sent the value of the peso tumbling. Lopez Obrador, a popular leftist, says the overhaul is needed to rid Mexico's judiciary of corruption and make sure it is responsive to popular will. Critics of the reform call it a power grab that will compromise one of the last remaining checks on presidential power. Meanwhile, on climate crisis, several people have been forced to flee their homes as floods swarmed northern Vietnam in the wake of Typhoon Yagi, while the death toll from Asia's worst storm this year reached 127. The Disaster Management Agency said on Tuesday in its newest update on the situation that landslides and floods stoked by the typhoon have killed at least 127 people in northern Vietnam and 54 others were missing. Most of the victims were killed in landslides and flash floods, the agency said, adding that 764 people have been wounded. On Saturday, the typhoon made landfall on Vietnam's northeastern coast, devastating a swath of industrial and residential areas. It had earlier hit the Philippines and the southern Chinese island of Hainan. Over 59,000 people have been forced to leave their homes in Yên Bai province, local authorities said, after the flood waters immersed nearly 18,000 homes. According to reports, flood waters in the capital Hanoi have reached levels not seen since 2008, citing a senior local official, and forecasters have cautioned more is anticipated in the city's historic center. Several rivers in northern Vietnam have risen to alarming levels, leaving villages and residential areas inundated, according to the disaster agency and the report. A 30-year-old bridge over the Red River in the northern province of Phu Tho collapsed on Monday, leaving 8 people missing. On Tuesday, authorities across the north subsequently banned or limited traffic on other bridges across the river, including Trong Dong Bridge, one of the largest in Hanoi, according to reports. Floods have also flooded 162,828 hectares, 402,357 acres, and 29,543 hectares of cash crops and destroyed closely 50,000 houses in northern Vietnam, according to the agency. Still on climate crisis, the National Hurricane Center NHS said a tropical storm moving over the Gulf of Mexico is anticipated to grow into a hurricane, threatening the southern United States, including the coastlines of Texas and Louisiana. Tropical storm Francine is expected to travel over warm water that will serve as fuel to boost it before it makes landfall as a Category 1 hurricane on Wednesday, with winds of 90 mph. The storm is anticipated to stay just offshore of the coast of northeastern Mexico on Tuesday as it moves northeast towards the United States. Coastal residents are being warned of life-threatening storm surge of up to 10 feet 3 meters in places, as well as potential tornadoes and dangerous winds, forecasters said. Residents were encouraged to evacuate some low-lying areas. Tropical storm Francine was around 380 miles, 610 kilometers southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana, nearly 85 miles, 136 kilometers west of New Orleans, with maximum sustained wind speeds of 65 mph. It is 9 mph, short of hurricane status as of Tuesday afternoon. Coastal hurricane warnings have been stretched eastward to Grand Isle, LA. A tropical storm warning is now in effect to the mouth of the Pearl River. including metropolitan New Orleans. Jeff Landry, the governor of Louisiana, urged residents not to panic but be ready and heed evacuation warnings. Some schools and colleges in the state closed on Tuesday through Wednesdays as a precaution. In Baton Rouge, Louisiana's capital, long lines started forming as people filled petrol tanks and stocked up on groceries. The Louisiana coast is still recovering from battering in 2020 from Hurricanes Laura and Delta, followed a year later by Hurricane Ida. The state recently marked the 19th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, a major Category 5 storm that caused 1,392 deaths and damages approximated at nearly $200 billion US. U.S. oil and gas producers on the Gulf of Mexico, including ExxonMobil and Shell, have evacuated staff and in some cases paused drilling in preparation for the storm. On more stories now, Biden suggests lifting ban on Ukraine's long-range weapons. President Joe Biden has hinted at Washington easing restrictions on Ukraine using U.S. long-range missiles against Russia. It will fulfill continual requests by Ukraine to loosen the limits on U.S. supply weapons if granted, which officials have said has left them fighting against Russia's full-scale invasion with their hands tied. Russia is yet to comment, but President Vladimir Putin has earlier said such action could lead to very serious problems. Biden's remarks come as Antony Blinken, U.S. Secretary of State, and his UK counterpart, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, are set to meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv. Blinken said one of their aims ahead of the visit was to hear directly from the Ukrainian leadership about their objectives and what we can do to support these needs. Blinken and Lammy are journeying together to the Ukrainian capital after talks in London. During his visit to the UK, Blinken accused Iran of supplying short-range ballistic missiles to Russia, saying they could be deployed against Ukrainians within weeks. Lammy described Iran's move as a significant and dangerous escalation. The missiles are possibly to improve Russia's arsenal, letting it to hit Ukrainian cities close to Russia's borders or areas it already controls at the same time as it deploys its long-range missile deeper into Ukrainian territory. Iran has repeatedly denied supplying such self-guided weapons to Russia. Since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, the U.S. has been reluctant to supply or sanction the use of weapons that could strike targets deep inside Russia for fear it will escalate the conflict. It has, however, loosened some of the restraints on such missile use, allowing Ukraine to use long-range missiles to strike areas along Russia's border where troops are firing from. Kyiv's other allies have also been supplying some long-range weapons with restrictions on how and when they can be used inside Russia, out of concern such strikes could prompt retaliation that draws NATO countries into the war or provokes a nuclear conflict. President Zelensky in recent months has criticized the pace of weapons deliveries and asked for authorization to strike aims deep inside Russia with Western-supplied missiles, a step the U.S. has thus far resisted. Earlier this year, Russia's President Putin also cautioned that attacks by Ukraine on Russia with Western missiles risk triggering a wider war. He added responsibility for any strikes inside Russia's territory will lie with Western arms supplies, even if Ukraine's forces carried out the strikes. The US, UK, France, and Germany separately on Tuesday enforced fresh sanctions on Iran for supplying Russia with ballistic missiles for use in Ukraine. Measures included restrictions on national carrier Iran's air's ability to fly to the UK and Europe, as well as travels ban and asset freezes on a number of Iranians accused of facilitating military support for Russia. In African scenes now, vote counting begins in Jordan after parliamentary polls. In Jordan on Tuesday evening, counting got underway following the country's first parliamentary election under a new law intended to boost representation. While voter turnout was higher than in 2020, participation in the poll remained low. 32.25% of the country's over 5 million eligible voters had cast their ballots, the Independent Election Commission (IEC) said. An IEC spokesperson said there had been no delays in the opening of elections, no reports of major violations in any of the electoral districts. Under the latest electoral law, the number of seats in the House of Representatives has been raised from 130 to 138. These includes provisions at the quota for the representation of women and youths, with the minimum age for parliamentary candidates lowered from 30 to 25. In a country where tribal affiliations still play a major role in politics, the electoral reforms are seen as a major move in Jordan's decade-long democratization process. While Islamists are expected to gain support in the election because of rage over Israel's war in Gaza, the vote is still broadly expected to keep parliament in the hands of tribal and pro-government factions. Final results are due to be announced before the weekend. We take a short break now. When we come back, I'll bring you stories from Nigeria. Please don't go anywhere. You're welcome back. Now, stories from Nigeria, and we begin with 30 African countries delegates attend Nigeria AI conference. Tech leaders, academics, policymakers, and entrepreneurs from across Africa and beyond have assembled in Nigeria to deliberate opportunities and challenges raised by the development and use of artificial intelligence (AI). The 2024 Pan-African AI Conference in Lagos, co-hosted by the United States, is seen as a major move in Africa's technological future. Nigeria's Minister for Communications, Innovation and Digital Economy, Bosun Tijani, in his opening remarks said Nigeria and the world must make sure the digital transformation journey is inclusive, equitable, and human-focused. Tijani also declared a $61,000 artificial intelligence fund for Nigeria's brightest AI startups. The city's energy was reflected at the conference as delegates from over African countries mingled with their counterparts from the US to share ideas and explore the future of AI on the continent. Dr. Sept Center, acting special envoy for critical and emerging technology, said there were two major challenges with regards to future of artificial intelligence (AI). One is to create the kind of safe and secure governance framework that is going to enable, not hinder, innovation that can create confidence in citizens anywhere in the world really to use AI embedded in their lives, he said. Center added that the second challenge was to create the enabling business environment that can encourage the private sector to develop and to invest in Nigeria to enable the kind of AI build-out that I think is in our mutual interest. The Nigeria and the United States collaboration emphasized the significance of cross-continental partnerships in driving technological innovation, with both countries recognizing the massive potential AI holds for economic and social development. On climate crisis, Borno Dam collapse, federal government opens IDP camps as Maiduguri floods. As Borno State suffered its most devastating flood disaster in 30 years, thousands of Maiduguri inhabitants have been displaced, with the Nigerian Correctional Service recapturing 3 inmates after a jailbreak, while 80% of animals at the Sunda Kiarimi Park Zoo died. President Bola Tinubu, following the disaster, who's presently abroad, called for the quick evacuation of residents in communities overtaken by floods. According to the National Emergency Management Agency (NEMA), 70% of Maiduguri, the Borno state capital, has been inundated by the fast-moving waters, while the flood also ravaged other major city locations, including the palace of the Shehu of Borno, Umar ibn Garba el-Kanemi, the State Secretariat, Post Office, Cemetery, Lagos area, Bulabulin, Gwenge, Monday Market, University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital, and Kofar Shehu. NEMA spokesperson Monzo Ezekiel said, according to report, some locations that I personally know and consider to be high ground from the reports we receive are already underwater, including Lagos Street, the market area, the palace of the Shehu of Borno. At least the front of the palace, we can see water there. Borno's flat ground geology made it easier for water to flow into passage areas in Maiduguri city, adding that the flood started after the Alau Dam overflowed following heavy rains, the NEMA spokesperson said. Monzo said NEMA could not determine the number of displaced people, but estimated that with about 70% of the town underwater, then about 70% of more than 800,000 Maiduguri residents might have been affected. State government efforts to relocate displaced residents were ongoing, according to NEMA spokesperson, who added that 3 internally displaced people camps had been opened to accommodate those affected. So far this year, floods have killed no less than 229 people, displaced around 386,239 more, and affected 94,491 houses in parts of the country, but mainly in the northern region. At least 125,805 hectares of farmland have also been affected, NEMA figures showed. And finally, on the news, presidency says NLC president must honor security summons. The presidency has reacted to the Monday's arrest of the president of Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, Comrade Joe Ajaero, emphasizing that he was not above the law and must comply with summons from the nation's security agencies. The position was in response to accusations of human rights abuses leveled against Nigeria by the trade union Congress TUC in the United Kingdom, UK. The controversy broke out after Ajaero was stopped from traveling abroad to speak at Labour conference in London. According to the presidency, this action was taken because Ajaero had snubbed the invitation of law enforcement agency conducting an ongoing probe. Bayo Onanuga, special advisor to the president on information and strategy, who revealed the presidency's position, highlighted that under the Nigerian constitution, no individual is exempt from lawful investigation. The government drew parallels with other democratic nations, pointing out that trade union leaders in countries like the United Kingdom, Europe, and the United States are anticipated to comply with law enforcement agencies. Onanuga further clarified that the invitation extended to Ajaero by the Department of State Services DSS was not connected to his role as NLC president. The government maintained that as a responsible citizen, Ajaero should honor the invitation and address any issues arising from the investigation through proper channels. The presidency also took the opportunity to address broader labor issues in the country, accusing the labor movement of sometimes advancing ideological positions that fly in the face of economic realities. Spite the present intentions, the government insists there is no adversarial relationship between the labor movement and the administration. It reaffirmed President Tinubu's commitment to protecting civil liberties and the rights of all citizens, describing him as a pro-democracy activist president. A recap of major stories says 5 key points from Trump and Harris's U.S. presidential debate. U.S. man wins $50 million after 10 years wrongfully imprisoned. Protesters storm Mexico Senate over judicial reform debate. Thousands flee Vietnam as Typhoon Yagi death toll hits 127, and Tropical Storm Francine to become hurricane before hitting Louisiana. That's all in the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.